This workshop on writing personal stories in your Vote Forward letters is based on Vote Forward's original guidance for a sort of do-it-yourself workshop and emails we've conducted with Vote Forward since then to even add some more information. And we are going to each craft a persuasive personal story tonight about how voting impacts us or someone in our lives. Our goal is to help you build a persuasive story that is specific, heartfelt, and compelling that could convince an infrequent voter to turn out in November. Because research on Vote Forward letters is validating what research has already showed about in-person conversations too. When we tell persuasive personal stories, we can connect in a way that sometimes opens people to change their point of view. And again, you can view this slides presentation. I'm going to put the link in the chat and I'll read it out for the recording. For all the most up-to-date guidance from Vote Forward and other experts at this short link, bit.ly/betterletters22. You may even see it in the document title. I don't know if that's showing as part of my slides right now, but it is the document title of these slides. So let's keep going. You are at an event hosted by our group, Target Majority Swing Left NYC. Sorry, I'm a little bit tired today. And I know Sue Friel is on the call, who is with Swing Left NYC. We are Target Majority NYC. We are a Swing Left and Indivisible group. And we're one of the oldest and most active Swing Left groups in New York City, recently became an Indivisible group as well. Our mission as a group is to help you have the highest possible impact on elections that decide who's in power, and to win on the issues that are existential for our people and our planet, like democracy, racial justice, and climate. We currently are running events 3 days a week, and we would love for you to join us anytime. Our short link is bit.ly/tmajority. We are running workshops on Sunday afternoons at 3. Those in March, we will set up some new workshops like this one today. And in the next couple weeks, actually, we have this Sunday at 3, a deep canvas introduction training. And then the following Sunday, actually, a climate simulation game where you can learn, you can sort of play out climate policies and see how we can hopefully hit the goal of reducing the temperature, greenhouse gases, so that the global temperature doesn't rise more than 1.5 degrees. On Wednesdays, we are running this workshop until we have letters, and then we'll sort of be doing a hybrid of personal stories workshops and letter writing parties that will become letter writing parties every Wednesday starting in March, running all year till the mail date. And on Saturdays, the 26th, we will be heading to Bucks County in Pennsylvania to do our first voter registration day trip. And actually, there is another Sunday event, which is collaborative with Sue's group, Swing Left NYC, and some other groups. Sue, that's I think at 1, right? 1 to 2:30, we're doing a letter party starting in March.
Yes, 1 to 2:30. It starts March 6th.
Awesome.
Sunday, March 6th, so very soon.
Yes. So just FYI, if anyone is here from the press, this is off the record. We love having you here in your personal capacity. And for anyone who has not written a Vote Forward letter before, right now you're looking at one of the more recent campaigns. It's not the 2022 letter because we're waiting for those to come out. So it's not an example of a personal story, but it is an example of the type of message we used to send in our Vote Forward letters. We always have put a personal message into these letters that answers the prompt, I vote because, or I vote in every election because. Vote Forward has offered best practices and continues to offer these for how we can best persuade readers, but they never tell us what to say, and I'm not here to tell you what to say. What we're going to do today is discuss options and considerations and thought starters and some guidance, but these are your letters. And again, just in case anyone has not written these before, I hope that you will go ahead and sign up right away at voteforward.org. So votefwd.org, so that you will be all set to go the minute they drop these brand new letters any day now. It does take a couple days to get approved typically. So the first step is to go to votefwd.org and sign up. And I will go ahead and drop that in the chat as well. And I forgot to put the link in the chat that I will do now for signing up for these events that I just discussed, happening other days of the week. And then here is the link to sign up with Vote Forward. So why do we write Vote Forward letters? Because they're proven effective. These letters are always part of ongoing randomized controlled trials with really impressive protocols, really tight data science. And in fact, in 2020, these letters were declared among the highest impact turnout tactics by the prestigious Analyst Institute. It was really impressive in a presidential cycle when there is so much saturation of messaging going into people's mailboxes and over the airwaves. They were able to demonstrate that a letter alone boosted turnout really significantly. In fact, it was a shockingly high amount for what they expected to see. And in midterm cycles in the past, sometimes these letters have boosted turnout by about 2%. That is enough to win tight races. And we believe that personal stories may perform even better. So who reads them? Especially when we're writing a heartfelt story, it may really help to be able to visualize the reader in some fashion. So Vote Forward maintains two separate campaigns, two separate types of lists per state. One is called the P list for political, and it is an explicitly partisan list that they have pulled where they are able to say that this voter is a strong lean for Democrats. Then there's the social or S list, which goes to underrepresented voters, especially voters of color, regardless of their affiliation. They may be Democrats, they may be Republicans or independents. They're not allowed to actually look at their voter registration status in pulling this list because it is a list that is created to partner with organizations who must be nonpartisan. A group like Swing Left, a group like Indivisible is allowed to be partisan because of their tax status. So Swing Left actually asks us volunteers with Swing Left to be sure that that P list gets done. We are actually Vote Forward's largest partner, able to write the partisan list. And just to call out that if you're ever looking at what's available to download from Vote Forward, if you don't see both a P and an S, you only see a P list available in a particular location, that list is going to include all the Democratic leaning voters. So all the Democratic leaning voters of color will be in that list as opposed to being in the S list. And again, one of the reasons that I wanted to share this information is, knowing who you're writing could influence how you feel about sharing your Why I Vote story. You may pick the political P list because you like knowing that you're turning out someone who leans strongly toward Dems and maybe is assumed to share some foundational Democratic values. Or you may especially want to be connecting with voters of color regardless of political leanings. And so you have those options. So why personal stories? We believe a personal story from the heart may better convince the reader to vote. Authentic emotional details, the specifics of our lives, our personal details, can make our letters even more gripping and more memorable. And we think that these help readers feel how voting positively affects real people's lives. In a New Mexico 2021 trial in a special election, personal story letters had much higher impact than the usual letters. And this is something that you can learn a lot more about by reading the full documentation from Vote Forward in their Do-It-Yourself workshop document. And for people watching the recording, the link to access that is a short link, bit.ly/VF story. So here in the visual, what you're looking at is the pink bar shows how many people voted who received no letter. Then the light blue bar is the people who received the usual various types of messages in a vote forward letter. And then the darker blue bar is the people who received the special new personal story approach. And what you can see is the boost that we got by sending a letter is almost twice as much with the personal story as the boost we got by sending a sort of traditional vote forward letter. I don't want to overplay that doubling the impact potential because we really can't expect that always to hold true. This was a very small test. This was a very small election, but it was definitely noticeable and exciting. So let's read a couple examples. I can read the first one, and if anybody who's interested to read one of the next ones aloud could use the raise your hand button in Zoom, that will help me to know that there's people interested because I can't see you while I'm presenting. So here's the first example. I vote because I want my representatives to take action to protect our environment. I almost had to evacuate my house last summer because a wildfire was burning just a couple of miles away. In the past few years I've lived here, these fires have been getting bigger and scarier, and sometimes I can't even leave my house because the air is so thick with smoke. It makes me feel glad to see that my representative in Congress is taking action against these climate-related disasters so that future generations won't have to fear the same fear that I did. Is anyone interested to give a try reading aloud? I'm not seeing any raised hands, but if you want to unmute yourself, that would also be fine, or I can keep reading. You can keep thinking about it. I'll read this next one. I vote because in the operating room, moments after my son was born, I promised him that his mom and I would do everything we could to build a better world for him. His generation faces so many challenges, from a warming climate to a growing gap between the rich and everyone else, from school shootings to a deeply divided society. I vote to keep my promise to my baby son and elect leaders who will build a better world for him to grow up in. I'm going to just check in again. Anybody want to unmute and help me out and read one? I will read the third. And Sue, can I tap you to be on deck for the fourth? So the third one is, I vote because I always experience a strong sense of community every time it's time to fill out a ballot. I enjoy talking and comparing notes with family and friends. And when I attend volunteer events, I am always incredibly invigorated by the turnout of people of all ages and backgrounds. No matter which direction the election results go, I find the experience rewarding. I come away knowing that I participated and I contributed to the process. It feels good. Awesome. And Sue, you want to hit it?
Yep. Example 4. I vote because I was diagnosed with cancer in 2017. It was very scary, but I felt lucky that because of federal health care reform, I had health insurance that paid for my treatment. Now that I'm in remission, if I'm ever between jobs, I'll be able to get insurance only because the law protects people like me with pre-existing conditions. When I vote, I make sure to support candidates who support these policies that have been so important to me and so many of my friends and loved ones.
Thank you. Anyone feel inspired to read the next one? Okay, I'll continue. I vote because my wife owns her own small business and she relied upon government support during the pandemic to help keep her business running. It was a scary time when she had no work coming in and we didn't know what was going to happen in the future. I vote for local, state, and national leaders who will work to ensure that small businesses are able to survive challenging times like these. And the last one, last chance to get on board. Anybody? This was written by, oh, yay, Rob, thank you. Go ahead and read number 6.
I vote because there's power in my vote. So much power that there are some who want to prevent people like me from voting. But in spite of this, I remain an active voter. It's because of voters who went before me that I received a well-rounded and balanced education. I am now a health professional who serves all kinds of people who need my help. As a voter, I get a say in what kind of schools help the young people in my community too.
Thank you. And I'll just say that you can actually find a couple additional story examples in the speaker notes for these slides. And I failed to mention when you access the slides, you will find additional information for a number of slides. So if there's something you're particularly interested in, you can open up the slides and use the view menu to show speaker notes and get even more information about some of these topics. So you may have noticed that sometimes these stories follow a similar outline. To my eye, there are 2 outlines. So I wanted to give some shortcuts, some tips about how you might structure your story. They always start, I vote because, and in outline A, you dive right into an emotionally gripping situation. So I vote because moments after giving birth, wow. I vote because I was diagnosed with cancer. These things will grab a reader and make them pay attention, especially because it's in your personal handwriting. So they move on from there to include issues at stake for them in that situation. This is something that in advertising we call the problem. You might have a problem and then there's a solution in your story. You don't have to have a problem. There was one example that was just all about the positive feelings and impacts of being a voter. But most of them do end up touching on issues and themes that are a problem in our lives, something that may worry us or we feel passionately about. So you might start with that gripping situation, that's your personal story context, and then start elaborating on issues that are at stake in that situation. So as you add specific details to your story, you're also sort of broadening it to certain themes. Then you tie it back to your goal in voting. Something like, I want to elect leaders who will do something related to those issues or that experience. Or, I vote because I don't want other people to experience that problem. And our representatives can take care of that. The other direction is really very similar. It just starts with the themes and then gets into the personal details. So I vote because I experience community. Or I vote because I want leaders who protect our climate. You might start with the theme that matters to you and then tell that specific story that makes it personal, that makes the reader imagine what you experience, or your loved one or a friend, or what you worry might happen to someone that you care about. And again, bring it back at the end to what voting does for you. So the solution to that problem. I'm always like, in one of the stories, it was, I'm always glad when our leaders do something about my experience. So I want to just pause. Having gone through that much, we'll go through a bunch more, but just checking, and it doesn't look like there have been questions in the chat.
Although I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so this compared to what we were doing last year, even with personal stories, because I basically always did a personal story, but they were very concise and maybe 2 sentences.
Right.
These are much more elaborate. That's a change.
Yes, I expect we'll see there's a little more space in the letter because they do know that some of us will be writing these. And it's up to you how long it is. The examples that they gave were quite a bit longer, some of them, than the usual in the past. I agree. It's sort of a trade-off. You may write fewer letters per hour. I don't think it'll be that many fewer, but it will be somewhat fewer. But then maybe those letters are that much more effective at turning people out. So, sort of might be worth it. There's a lot of information ahead, so let's hold any other questions for the end. Maybe we'll answer your question. That one is not addressed though, so perfect timing. And so finding your story, you should look for a specific experience and something that moves you. And it could be a hardship or it could be a joy. You know, it could the birth of a child, the almost losing your house in a wildfire. You know, there's real extremes that are possible there. And they should be topics or issues that do directly impact you or someone you know, or might. You believe they might. It helps, all of these, you know, this guidance really helps you then express how voting positively affects you or someone else. And that should be a goal. We don't want to just dwell in the negative. We want to bring it to the positive, the solution. We do recommend you just focus on one experience. Don't try to tackle, you know, two things in one story. And as I've been implying, it could have already happened, could be happening currently, or it could be something that might happen in the future. As always, we do need to keep our Vote Forward letters nonpartisan, and we do want to, you know, keep reminding ourselves to keep it personal. So we won't be including any party or candidate specifics. This is actually legally required for Vote Forward letters, and it actually tests best as well because people are very saturated with partisan messages. Keeping issues on the more general side versus specific policies, so healthcare reform versus ACA, is better. More general issues when we're talking about issues. And avoiding political buzzwords and jargon completely, which is the other reason not to be talking about the ACA. And the reason is that these things people gloss over, you know, or don't know about that specific jargon or that specific policy. They know about healthcare, you know, as an example. And then make sure when you are talking about issues, as much as you can, keep bringing it back to those personal details. So an example Vote Forward gave us is, because of federal healthcare reform, I had health insurance that paid for my treatment, versus I support healthcare reform because I think everyone should have access to high quality healthcare. While that is definitely true and something, you know, I could feel very passionate about, it doesn't paint a personal picture for the reader, and it doesn't make, there's nothing about it that is really personal. It's just a position that many people have. So a few things, you know, to help us keep the reader always in mind. As always, we're not aiming to use fear tactics with our readers. Our base generally is known to withdraw and not be activated as much by fear mongering as the other side tends to be. However, it's okay to be talking about worrying issues, concerning things, you know, the problem. And when you do, then offer a hopeful solution, it can be powerful. We never want to be pressuring or lecturing voters. We want to always respect their dignity. And there are some examples of messages that you might be tempted to use, but we shouldn't, because they really are kind of lecturing in the speaker notes, like our rights are at stake. If you don't vote, other people decide, you know, don't miss the deadline. Like all of that is really best not to say, because it doesn't really respect the dignity of the reader as much. And we are in these times so worried about voter suppression and alarmed and upset. But when we write about it, we want to take a little care, because people are generally very aware, painfully aware of voter suppression that may apply to them or in their state. However, you know, and when we just list barriers to voting and emphasize barriers to voting, it can actually end up communicating to that person that they should just expect their vote's not going to count. And it really discourages voting. But when we are talking about voter suppression, like we have that one story example and a few others in the speaker notes that talk about, actually just one example that talks about voter suppression right now. But when we talk about it, we also might want to consider resolving in ways that help the reader feel proud and feel empowered. Just a couple other watch outs. We do want to suggest that we not write about stories of personal violence. We don't have the opportunity to read the room. You know, this letter just shows up cold and we only have a couple sentences to tell our story. Your story may be, a story like that may be triggering for your reader and just cause them to withdraw, which would really be opposite to your intention. We also recommend the ultra polarizing topics like abortion or gun policy. We just don't know. We are writing to independents that lean Democrat. We are writing all over the country. We just don't know that every reader's beliefs are going to be aligned with ours on some issues like that. Anytime you're not sure, there's a gut check that you could run, which is to imagine that you've arrived at a likely Democrat's door, you know, to knock on their door. Would you tell this story? Would you lead with it? Would you just tell the story right away? Or would you get a read on them first? Unfortunately, we don't get to get a read on them with our letters, so that probably wouldn't be the story to go with. Maybe there's another one that might also really motivate you and that you could really connect with and tell. And just also with some of those things in mind, wanted to offer some research-based unifying language. So some ways of framing your story that may reduce polarization on an issue that you know might be polarizing a little bit, and help persuade more people. Like, these are never bad to lean into. You know, sharing widely held values, whether that's the freedom to express our voice, for example, the freedom that voters decide, the fairness for everybody, equity messages, doing less harm, honesty and integrity, pursuing our dreams, ideals in our environment like clean air and water. These things all tend to expand our reach. So we convince more undecided people when we're appealing to shared values like this. And there is a practice that I would encourage anybody to learn more about called the race class narrative. There are links in the speaker notes for this slide that will teach you a lot about it. The race class narrative helps persuade the most undecideds and our base by explicitly naming that we share a value across differences in race and class, naming both. So phrases like, no matter what we look like or where we are from, you know, incorporating that into your story. Or whatever our color, our background, or our zip code, most of us believe. There's actually an example with in the speaker notes for example 6 that demonstrates how you could weave the race class narrative into your story, perhaps, or a way that one person did. And I'm tempted to go into the race class narrative more because I absolutely love it, but I will just say it's an empirically tested narrative approach on race and class that neutralizes the use of dog whistle racism. There are a number of other prompts for how you could think of your story to tell. And so I'm just going to encourage you, I'm not going to read through all of these, but I'm going to encourage you to open the slides if you haven't already and look at slide 23. And I'm going to put the link to the slides in the chat again. And actually, for anybody watching the video, it will also be in the notes of the YouTube video. So I think with that, we could stop and ask questions for anybody that has them. But for everybody who feels ready to give it a try, I want to encourage you to mute the computer, you know, keep yourself muted and go try writing. Let's set a clock for 10 minutes so we could come back at 7:45 and you could try a draft of your story. And I can also answer anybody's questions in that time who has anything that they're still thinking about before they give it a try. I'll put up this slide with the story structure outlines, but you know, as I'm answering questions, we might end up bopping around to other slides.